I'm Kevin Cirilli, Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg Television and for Bloomberg Radio. We're here with Senator Shelley Capito, a Republican from West Virginia. Senator, thank you for joining us. You, of course, are the ranking member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. But I want to start with where the stimulus stands, because in the House of Representatives, they're expecting a vote within the next 24 hours. But you've raised some concerns about this $1.9 trillion stimulus package.
Well, I have serious concerns. First of all, we had 5 packages that we had done bipartisan over the past year. COVID help and relief on the health side is exceedingly important. This bill has like 9% that goes to vaccines and testing and therapeutics. The rest is just a wish list of filling up buckets for basically the Democrats as they've been moving into taking over the majority. And so that's deeply disappointing. The other thing on it is I think that if you look at schools money, for instance, there's a lot of money still left in the schools that we put into place at the end of December. Yet we're putting over $100 billion into our schools, and a lot of them still aren't open. So I'm very frustrated, not just with the process, but I went to the White House with 9 other Republicans to say, let's negotiate, and we were basically shut out.
So where does the process stand now? Is this all but a done deal for likely signing?
Oh, I think it's totally done deal. I think it's too bad, too, because this is, if the president in his inauguration speech said he wanted unity, he represents all the people, he represents all viewpoints, and yet when we get into a point where we can really negotiate with him, and he had us to the White House to do just that, it falls very, very flat.
So even as this is happening, there's other conversations that are brewing, particularly on funding for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. How have those preliminary talks been going on funding for infrastructure?
Well, I'm on the EPW committee. I'm the ranking Republican there, and I work with our chair, Senator Carper. We had a surface transportation bill that we passed a year ago that was totally bipartisan, 21-0, had a lot of really good things in it. That's going to be our base bill that we're going to start with, and we're going to start out bipartisan. And then, it'll move to the Finance Committee to talk about the funding mechanisms. Now, I'm reading, like you are, all kinds of speculations as to what's going to happen, but I'm determined to do this the way we've always done it in the past, which is working together.
I think the American Society of Civil Engineers put a price tag at somewhere like $3 trillion. It's a lot of money, especially after this latest stimulus round.
Yeah, I mean, we've already spent probably in excess of $4 trillion on the coronavirus pandemic, and here we're coming up to something that we normally pay for, which is infrastructure, surface transportation, water projects. There's already been a lot of money in broadband. I mean, I know we need more, but sure, if you had a wish list, we'd all say we want $4 trillion, but we got to be realistic here.
In terms of infrastructure and digital infrastructure in particular, President Biden several weeks ago issued executive orders for trying to make sure that the United States diversifies its supply chain from China, especially with the semiconductor chip shortage. Right. Is this a bipartisan concern?
Absolutely. I mean, we actually have had several votes on that, and we had them previous to this administration. This is really important. I think what we learned in the pandemic in terms of supply chain, maybe not semiconductors, but swabs and pharmaceuticals that we need to produce in this country when we have an emergency. Well, we're being held hostage basically by countries, in particular China, in terms of our lack of production and have the supply chain for our high-tech industry. So let's move it back here. We can make it, and we can do it very well and create a lot of jobs.
How do you incentivize companies to bring them back here so that we can diversify?
Well, I think first of all, I think American companies basically want to produce in the United States. I think it's gotten away from us over the years because of cost issues and other very clever ways that China's been able to attract our American businesses. But I think now we're realizing that with that attraction comes a lot of handcuffs in terms of losing your intellectual property, in terms of the investments, in terms of disclosures that our companies have to do. But if the shoe's not on the other foot, I think they'd rather do business in this country.
Senator Shelley Capito, you've tried to do something very difficult here in the halls of Congress, which is to work across the aisle, to try to, in a very polarizing time, on issues like supply chain diversification, like infrastructure, to try to really thread that needle. And yet, is it becoming more difficult in this post-stimulus climate?
Well, if you think about it, a 50-50 Senate is very, very rare. And
West Virginia has a lot of power right now.
And if you need another 10 votes to get a bipartisan bill across the line, it's a big challenge. But let's look back at what we were doing before we got to the 50-50 split. We passed a lot of big items that were bipartisan: criminal justice reform, Great American Outdoors Act, all kinds of things that we all had buy-in on. That's what we should be doing. We should be vying for that bipartisan sweet spot, so to speak, and realizing you can't get everything. Now, I understand there's pent-up demand on the other side. But at the end of the day, I think what's best for the country is if we work together.
So when Democrats say get rid of the filibuster, you say
no way. If we don't have the filibuster, the minority has no say. I was in the House for 14 years, total majority driven and kind of a wild place. I love it over there. But, the Senate was created to be more deliberative and to be able to find the way to negotiate. And I think we should go back to where our strengths were.